Good afternoon, everyone. Today we're going to be looking at circle graphs from the grade 7 curriculum, and we're going to be looking at specifically 20 people's favorite seasons: spring, summer, fall, and winter. Okay, so we're going to look at the data, get some percentages out of it, and then pop that information onto a circle graph as accurately as we can. So the first step is always getting the total amount of people that were surveyed, right? Because we need to know how many people actually answered this question. So if we add up all four seasons together, we'll get 7 plus 8 plus 1 plus 4 for a total of 20 people surveyed. Okay? Now we want to know what percent of the 20 people answered for each of the seasons, so that we can pop that information onto the circle. And so first off, we have that spring got 7 out of the 20 votes. Okay. Similarly, summer got 8 out of the 20 votes, fall got 1 out of the 20 votes, and winter got 4 out of the 20 votes. Okay. Now, to get the information onto the circle, we need the percentage. Okay. So for our first fraction, I'm going to give you guys 2 different strategies that I teach my students. The first one, we've already covered this year. We can always get the percentage of a fraction by treating the fraction as a division, because that's really what fractions are at the end of the day. And so 7/20 is exactly the same as thinking 7 divided by 20. And so we can do 7 divided by 20, and then clearly this is going to give us a decimal answer. And so to get the percentages are always out of 100. And so we simply multiply our decimal by 100 to get the percent, okay? Now, a better strategy, in my opinion, one that's a bit more straightforward, just because we're lucky enough to have a nice number like 20 for the total number of people surveyed, this is going to go nicely into an equivalent fraction that has a denominator of 100. And the reason why that's so convenient is because we know that all percentages are always out of 100. And so if we can manage to get our fractions out of 100, it converts very naturally and very quickly, okay? So, first off, I'll ask you, 20 times what would bring us to a denominator of 100? Well, clearly that's 20 times 5. And so, in keeping our fractions equivalent, we do the same thing in the numerator. And so, 8 times the 5 brings us to 40 out of 100, okay? Now, 40 out of 100 naturally converts to percent, because percentages are always out of 100 by definition. And so we get 40% of the votes were casted for summer, okay? Next up, we have 1/20 for fall. And so again, we have the same denominator as before. I'm gonna write that a little bit nicer. 100, and so again, 20 times 5 brings us there. And so 1 times 5 in the numerator tells us that fall gets 5 out of every 100 votes if this were to scale upwards. And so 5/100 again converts naturally into a percent as 5%. And finally, winter at 4 out of 20 converts nicely into hundredths, because 20 times 5 becomes 100. And so 4 times 5 gives us a numerator of 20. And one more time, 20/100 converts naturally into 20%, okay? Again, you can use this first strategy for all of these. Divide the numerator by the denominator, and then multiply by 100. That'll give you your percent as well. That's just because I don't like it as much, because if we use a calculator for that one, whereas this one we can do kind of just using our brains, but it's up to you, okay? And so now that we have, okay, finally, if you actually do this calculation, you'll find that spring got 35% of the votes to finish it off, okay? Now, for putting information onto the circle graph, we could use the fact that a circle always has 360 degrees, and then we could calculate 35% of 360 degrees. We could then use a protractor to be perfectly accurate with each of our sections. However, I don't love having to do that every time, because here, I think it's better for my students to get a sense of estimating numbers and working with percentages, and kind of feeling more comfortable in drawing out estimations rather than using a protractor and kind of fine-tuning their motor skills. And so I'm going to encourage you guys to just draw this out using reasonable estimations, okay? I like to start with the bigger percentages first because I find them easier to draw to kind of start things off. And so our summer season got a whopping 40% of the votes. Now we know that if I were to draw a line fully down the center of the circle, that would obviously be 50%. We only have 40%, so we'll be a little bit short of that. So I think a reasonable estimation would be something like that. So first off, we'll have summer coming in at 40% of the votes, okay? Next up, we have 35% or 5% or 20%. I'm gonna go with 20%. You can choose your own way of doing things. You can use a slightly different strategy. You can pick a different order to kind of draw them onto the circle. I'm gonna go with 20% because we know that down the center, this would be an extra 10% because 40 plus 10 would bring us to 50%. And then if I can kind of estimate that same amount on the other side of the middle line by symmetry, then we'll get a nice 20%. And so that's what I'm gonna do. And I think that's a reasonable estimation for winter's 20% of the votes. Okay, so there's my estimation of 20%. Now we have fall at 5% and we have spring at 35%, right? We know that at the quarter mark that we need 25%, so we need a bit more than that for the springs, 35%. I'm gonna go somewhere around here. Let's say maybe that's maybe a little bit too high. Let's adjust a little bit. Let's say something like this, okay? I'm gonna go with this line. Okay, a little bit of ballparking here. And so we'll have spring on top at 35%. And then finally we have fall coming in at the measly 5%, okay? Again, I just fabricated these results. Please don't be upset with my fake data. And that brings us to an end. And so, again, I think this is a reasonable amount of estimations for each section of the circle graph. This is how I'm encouraging my students to go about it. I hope this helps. If you guys have any comments, suggestions, any requests for future videos, please leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.